Welcome to the Women and Wealth podcast with Esther Szabo. Esther is a respected leader in the field of personal financial advice with over 25 years of experience. After going through her own significant and challenging life-changing events, she overcame fear and self-doubt to launch her own successful advisory firm. Now Esther is ready to share her practical and personal experiences to help other women clear their hurdles and brave life's transitions. In this way, she inspires women to lead fulfilling and confident lives.
Hello and welcome to Women in Wealth with Esther Szabo from Gates Pass Advisors. Esther has a guest on the show again today, and she's given me the honor of introducing him and giving just a brief bio. Today, Paul Seabrook is joining us. Paul is a family law attorney. In 2010, he opened his own law firm in Seattle, Washington, and in 2013 returned to the San Francisco Bay Area where he opened Seabrook Law Offices. His passion is to work diligently to help people get out of toxic marriages and protect children going through the divorce process. Esther, I know that the whole entire theme of what you do is working with people in transition, so obviously that's why you brought Paul on the show. How did you guys get connected?
It really is why I brought Paul on the show. We just run in similar circles, and I really appreciate it's never a fun thing to talk about divorce. I apologize in advance to listeners who, even the word is still painful for them. But it's still really important to talk about what the process is, and if people are thinking about divorce, what might they be prepared for? So, Paul, I really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much.
Hi, Esther. Thank you so much for inviting me into your community, and I'll try to do my best to provide some valuable information today.
Well, I know you will, and I also really appreciate your perspective. I know you focus on that word toxic marriages, but you also really have a big place in your heart for kids caught in that painful place of divorce.
Yeah, divorce is a painful situation for everybody involved. And, being a former teacher myself, there's a passion for me to help kids get through childhood. It's not an easy thing. And when you're dealing with a divorce, it's really important that everybody involved do everything they can to provide as much peace and stability for the children as possible. So that definitely is a mission of my firm.
As we've talked before, in your experience, in my experience from working with women as they transition through and out of a divorce, everyone is different, and yet a lot of the feelings are similar in terms of what I hear about is the guilt, the shame, the loss, perhaps the betrayal feelings that, one thought, gosh, I thought we'd be here together forever, and we're here, and just supporting women through that, and occasionally men too. I do work with men as well. But in your experience, what makes one divorce experience different from another? Yeah,
I think, right at the start, a divorce can really be a surprising development for a lot of people. It's almost as if like a divorce will set the house on fire, and you need to, basically call in the emergency response team and make sure that right at the beginning, crazy things don't happen and people get to come to terms with what they're going to go through. As far as what makes one divorce different from another, I generally, will try to evaluate how complex the issues are that we're going to be dealing with, either with the children or with the property division. And of course, the more complex the case is, generally speaking, the longer it's going to be. And then you also look at the contentiousness of the parties. How hurt are the people involved? How much are they going to fight? Those are two of the factors, the complexity of the issues and the contentiousness of the parties, that really will define the nature of the divorce.
And when you talk about, make sure that crazy things don't happen, can you tell us a little bit more about what crazy things that you're experienced with seeing?
Well, the first thing you ask anybody contemplating a divorce is whether there's any domestic violence occurring. A lot of times somebody deciding to do a divorce is it's going to cause such an emotional outburst. And if there's already domestic violence present in the relationship, we're going to have to take steps to calm things down as best as we can. And, the domestic violence is absolutely the first question. And then the next thing we always talk about is, what's going to be the custody and visitation issue for the children? How are we going to get these children set up so that, they can find some peace in knowing what their schedule is going to be. After that, it's going to be the support issues. You got to get child support and spousal support issued if it's called for. And then after we've put out the fires that are needed and get everybody to a stable situation, then we kind of work on dividing the assets.
So it sounds like, when you bring up, that's a lot to unpack there. So let's step through some of those things. When you talk about domestic violence, so many times women don't want to leave for various reasons. One is it's really scary how they will be safe. How do you navigate that?
Man, it's such a case-by-case basis. There are some people who are terrified of charging one of their cards for our consultation fee because they're just going to, the other person is going to find out and it's gonna cause issues. And so a lot of women are terrified. A lot of men are abused as well. I mean, it kind of goes back and forth. And so you really have to take a look and see, a lot of people are not ready to file for a restraining order or get the police involved because of how scared they are. And then there are other people, there are other situations who, where they give as good as they get, and they want to file for a restraining order, but they're not really afraid of the other person because the abuse goes both ways. It's just a situation where what you want to get to is, if domestic violence is in play, you need to put a stop to it as soon as possible, particularly for the children.
And that's a whole other topic right there in terms of all that's involved in terms of putting a stop to it. But what you're saying is you're really familiar with hearing about domestic violence as being an issue.
Right. And it comes in all forms. A lot of people don't bring up the issues of domestic violence because they think it's related only to physical violence. But the emotional abuse that we see, the verbal abuse that we see, it's all the same dynamic where one person is kept in control through the domestic violence perpetrated by one of the parties. And so it's a messy topic. It's tough to get to, but you've got to address it so that it can stop.
And I appreciate you bringing up the emotional and the verbal abuse. I imagine that comes up while you talked about how contentious are the parties, how much there will be a fight. I imagine that you have witnessed a fair amount of that emotional and verbal abuse in your work.
Yeah, we deal with it every single day, and it's natural for people to think that the verbal and emotional abuse doesn't really count. That's unfortunate, and so we are constantly trying to educate, our clients and our potential clients about the seriousness of abuse and how it can come in many different fashions, and that we really want our clients to stop tolerating it because it's so damaging.
It is a really challenging topic, and the different things that you have seen, and this is the chosen area of professional work you've chosen to give your service to, and it's because you care so much about the children who are often powerless in the middle, let alone one spouse or both perhaps maybe feel very powerless. How do you navigate things like the child support? Not an easy thing, custody and visitation, especially when there's issues of power and control. How do you work that one through?
An honor to stand up for somebody who's having trouble asserting their rights in the relationship. Is you'll hear from me. One of the, I remember suffering quite a bit of emotional abuse during my first marriage, and the courage it takes to stand up for yourself and demand a better life for yourself. And, when you know it's not going to be with this person, it's really an honor for me to help people who make that decision to kind of stand up for themselves and do what's right for themselves and for their children. Those are the people we really enjoy working with. So it's the child support. I mean, we could get into so many factors where, how much does each parent make, and how much time do they spend with the children, and then the health insurance and the extracurricular activities and the daycare, and all these things get involved in what's going to be dealt with in child support. And so, we cover all the issues, and we get the best orders we can for our clients and for their children.
And so many, as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the different areas in financial planning. Typically, always, we come in after the divorce is final. And when you're talking about those different areas, that can take months to really get a good handle on those. And you typically don't have that much time. And those financial areas are quite emotional as well. Everyone has some emotional response to finances, and especially it can come in terms of security. How secure am I going to be? How secure is the child going to be? What are some things that people could expect if they have children? They worry about how a divorce may damage the child, but then they also want to be sure to get the appropriate amount of child support. How do you work? What can people expect if they're considering a divorce with children involved?
They can expect people to do crazy things in the middle of a divorce. This is a time where even good people are going to be behaving at their worst. And so we've seen people who work on a commission sort of intentionally slow down their commissions or try to defer their commissions so that they don't make more money and can lower their child support. We've seen parents demand more time with their children just to lower their child support, where they don't have any interest in really taking care of the children and really, getting the children what they need. It's all about saving a few bucks on child support. So you can expect to face challenges depending on what your spouse is going to do in the divorce situation. There's ways to, you just hope you didn't marry somebody who's going to pull things like this, but this is just the facts of what I see every day.
Mm-hmm. So just be prepared to, if it doesn't happen, great, but be prepared that they will surprise you, perhaps not surprise you, with the attempts to manipulate the situation to their own good.
Right. I mean, we're going to be up against somebody who has another attorney, and the attorney, they're going to know all the tricks I know, and, we're going to, hopefully the people can come together, the parties come together to make a situation that works for their family. But a lot of times we're dealing with a lot of negotiating back and forth on some very difficult arguments. Very difficult.
And so we've talked about what makes one divorce differ from another. And you said often it's the complexity and the contentiousness of the parties are a couple of the things that and the level of surprise, how much one party was surprised about a divorce is happening. What do you see as some consistencies that make the divorce process the most effective for everyone?
What helps people get through the divorce courts quicker is if both attorneys and both parties are reasonable and diligently work towards settlement. And unfortunately, there's times where if one person is motivated to delay the situation, oftentimes they're pretty successful in causing delays. I remember a case I had where the husband and wife were in pretty, they had their terms kind of worked out, and the opposing attorney was having so many health problems, she just simply couldn't get to it, and so the case went nowhere. And even though I filed motions with the court to get things to happen, she just had issues in her personal life, and nothing happened until she got off the case, and the client hired another attorney, and one person. And that's the problem with some of this, finding the settlement, finding the end in a divorce, is that a lot of times one person is going to be significantly motivated to delay the case. And so, if we're going to get it done, it's going to take everybody working towards the settlement. And that's not always easy to find.
Yeah, I have a picture of kind of a whitewater raft situation where, as much as you may not want to, you all have to be in the boat rowing towards that outcome, and you're going to hit rapids and all of that, but you're going to get through it if you're all rowing to the best extent together.
Absolutely. And putting the kids first is something that you're going to hear, while we have these ups and downs. You're going to, my clients hear from me all the time to put the kids first. Yeah. And that's one of the most difficult things.
Well, it's a hard thing, right? Because I had an experience in a legal situation. It wasn't anything to do with my practice, except it had to do with the landlord for the space I was renting. And we ended up he wouldn't move off something that was pretty serious. And we ended up doing mediation, and we ended up, quote unquote, winning. But what my experience was that you don't feel like you're winning. And it is so hard. There's so much resentment about even having to go through such a process that it is very hard to set that ego aside of, you're just wrong. And you're making me do this. How do you coach people around going against that instinct of just wanting to constantly put that person down for ruining your life and keep moving forward?
Absolutely. Yeah. You want, the clients, they want to win. And we're going to court where, a lot of times people in a court setting are going to win a lawsuit or win their case. But in a divorce, at least for me, my philosophy is that a win is, a chance at a new life. Most of these marriages that we're dealing with are intolerable for the people who are in them. And the real win is getting out of that life and getting on to a new life, especially where the children are taken care of. And, as far as going again, most people, when you're in a divorce situation, the instinctual thing is to do something that's going to be unhealthy. We'll constantly see parents who are disparaging the other parent in front of the kids. And that's just instinctual because, this person, you had kids with this person, and now you're getting a divorce. And so this could be the person you hate the most in the world. And it's only natural to disparage them. And if there are kids involved, they're going to be around to hear it. And then your family and friends, you're going to complain to them, and then the kids will hear it. And then they'll complain to you about the spouse, and the kids will hear it. And so one of the ways I coach my clients on this issue is, particularly with the kids, you got to get your family and friends together, get everybody in a room, and have a meeting. Let them know that we're going through a divorce, and let them know that you will not tolerate disparagement of the other parent in front of your kids. Those kids are going through a tough enough time, and the damage that is done through disparagement, you know this, your kids they're on the phone, but guess what? They're hearing the conversations, and they're studying their homework, and they're hearing the conversations, and they're seeing the fights, and it's just not good. And so while it may be instinctive to criticize the other parent and complain, it would be best for everybody involved if you got everyone in your life together and said, don't do that.
And I really appreciate that. That's like reaching beyond oneself. Do you often or ever suggest, also as part of that, help me not do that? So I'm going to ask you to not do that, my team of friends and family, but also help me not do that as well.
Yeah, that'd be best for everybody, is if there's accountability and you just, make sure that somebody, if you happen to slip into it, just, create some sort of signal that everybody's gonna share to stop it, because it's just not helpful.
Yeah. And I think those are great suggestions, because I know one of the things, and this is early in one of the podcasts, it might be, learn about Esther Szabo, which was the first one. I remember a client who's still a client, who came to me when her two boys were quite young. They were in single digits, and she was going through divorce, and she was just so exhausted from the process. And one of the things I ask clients is take them through a series of brief questions, and it's geared to what's really most important to you. And at the bottom line, when we got down to it, she just said, I want to be a really good mom to my kids. That was the bottom line thing. And I'm sure you hear that too, Paul. At the end of the day, I want to be a good parent to these kids. I don't want to be a bad parent.
Absolutely. And I've got this saying, this is one of the reasons why, being a divorce attorney, it can be hard. A lot of people, think that I'm helping to break up marriages or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think miserable people make miserable parents. And so there is a way to co-parent. There is a way to work together, even if the marriage can't last. And that's just a fundamental focus of my practice, is to help these parents get this issue settled and move on with their life, so that they have the energy and the time and the personal resources to give their kids everything they can.
Mm-hmm. And I will report that, and I'm sure you've seen it too, that the woman that I'm speaking of, both boys have master's degrees, are gainfully employed. She's actually on a trip with them. She is, it's a transformational thing. She did not stay there. And I know when we're going through tough times, I can relate to it too, in the loss of my first husband. When you're in the middle of a tough time, it's so easy to think this is how it's all going to be forever and ever and ever. And it is also coaching around, absolutely, this is how it feels today. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other through this difficult process.
Absolutely. And it's so emotional. I mean, it really, goes into our society, how, you're supposed to fall in love and get married and live happily ever after. And that those first two things are so much easier than the third one. We tend to fall in love and get married, maybe sometimes a little too fast, not knowing exactly what's going to be entailed with the happily ever after. There's a lot of work for a successful marriage. And if you can't make it happen, that doesn't mean you have to give up on, your kids are, tons of people are getting divorced every day, and we're finding ways to help them provide peace and stability for their children. So it is definitely possible.
And when I spoke a little bit ago about my own situation, which is not divorce, but I talked about mediation. Can you talk about what's the difference between using mediation versus use of an attorney, such as yourself, versus even just a do-it-yourself with nobody?
The do-it-yourself stuff is really tough. They've increased the number of forms you need to file, and if you don't do it right, then everything gets rejected and you have to do it again. The do-it-yourself is really hard. Mediation is a way a lot of people want to pursue mediation in order to save money on attorneys. And if you've got both parties committed to the mediation agreement, that can work very well. The scary thing for me, when we're looking at people who go through mediation, is entirely voluntary. And if you have somebody, we discussed earlier about somebody, usually there's somebody with a motive to delay the case. And I've seen situations where people have attempted to mediate and attempted to mediate and attempted to mediate, And right at the, 9 months, 12 months into the mediation efforts, it becomes clear that no settlement agreement is going to be reached. And then you have to then start the litigation process. And, so the way my firm approaches a situation is that we will pursue a litigation strategy, or we'll put the case on track to go to the judge while we try to settle it. And so we're always trying to settle it. But if we're unable to settle it, we're going to be in court in the next week instead of starting the court process after 9 months of mediation efforts. And that way you get to save time, and you get to really flush out whether or not somebody's really serious about settlement, or if they're just trying to delay things. And a lot of times people who normally would walk away from a mediation because they've got 6 months until the court process will get anywhere, if court is next week, you're able to put enough pressure on them to settle the case and get out of divorce court, which is where everybody wants to be.
With that, when you're in divorce court, what is helpful to have an attorney alongside you when you're in divorce court versus self-representing?
It depends on the attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're going into your, it's reasonableness is going to win the day in family court. At least if you're asking the judge to make a decision. The person who's most reasonable is probably going to, get the most points with the judge. And so it's important. I mean, that's where, like the attorneys in my firm, we don't take outrageous positions, because the judges, oftentimes, if we're asking them to make a decision, a lot of times it's a 51-49 call. And if the judge heard me make some ludicrous argument 2 weeks ago, and now I'm asking him to give me the benefit of the doubt, that's kind of tough to get. And so you want to make sure that if you're going to the judge, you're asking for what you think the judge is going to give, which is the most reasonable. That's kind of my approach, at least.
And how interested are the judges in going into the weeds and hearing every single piece of every party's side?
The judges absolutely love it when you settle your own case. A lot of it's a big myth out there that, and it's a threat that if you don't agree to what I'm saying, then I'm going to go tell the judge this. And generally speaking, the judges, how they do a tremendous work most of the time, and I've disagreed with some of the decisions I've gotten, but for the most part, they're going to have 20, 25 cases in the morning, 20, 25 cases in the afternoon. They're going to have that 3-4 times a week. They don't want more fighting. They are inundated with everybody's story. And I know one of the things that people want in this process is for somebody to listen. And my firm, we really make an effort to listen to our clients, because that is needed for their mental health. But so if we can provide listening board for the clients, oftentimes they don't need to bring that to the judge. A lot of times that stuff is going to be irrelevant to the judge, irrelevant to the issues, and the judge is going to appreciate keeping that stuff off their desk.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, because it's like we want to be heard, we want to be seen, we want to be validated for what we've gone through, but the judge is not the place to do that. It's the attorney or trusted guide through this process. Yeah,
that's where we have strong relationships with mental health professionals and counselors to help our clients through that, because it is one of the most difficult transition periods to go through in life, is going through a divorce. It is just brutal.
I really thank you, Paul, for just all that you've shared today. I really appreciate your focus on, the win for you is to help somebody have a chance at a new life. and that the kids are part of that new life as well, and that you do so much within your firm, with the attorneys within your firm, with every client case. So I know in as we close, you do have, even though you're talking about how you serve as a professional and your firm serves clients, you do have a do-it-yourself divorce course on your website.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. How do you guide people there?
Well, attorneys are expensive, and my effort to help people is not limited to how much is in their wallet. And so I've spent a lot of time and energy putting together this class that people can access, where it kind of goes through how to start a divorce, how to deal with. There's a portion on restraining orders and motions for emergencies and getting the support and getting the visitation scheduled. I've done my best to put something together for people who can't afford an attorney. It's not easy to afford an attorney in a divorce. That's for sure. So it's just sort of something I've put together to help as many people as I can.
Thank you so much, Paul. Your desire to help and be of service through your profession is really, really clear. If people wanted to reach you or get to that course, how can they do so?
You'll find it at SeabrookLawOffices.com. You can also call my firm, 408-212-7915, to reach out and see if we can help you one way or the other.
Thanks again, Paul, very, very much. I've really enjoyed what you shared with us today. And like I say with every guest, we could go deeper, but this is the time that we have. So I want to thank everybody also for listening and hanging in. If you want a need to speak with a financial professional you've come through a divorce and you're on the other side and you're still putting together your life, which you will, which is normal. This is what happens. I invite you to contact me at GatesPassAdvisors.com. Eric, I'll turn it back to you.
Absolutely. Paul, I'll tell you this, the passion that you have for your clients, for the children, for the entire situation, and the compassion as well, not just the passion, but the compassion really came through today. I thought it was a fantastic interview. Esther, I'm so glad that you brought Paul on. So Paul, thank you so much for being here. Of course, Esther, thank you for bringing him on the show. And our last thank you always goes to you, the listening audience. We wouldn't be here without you. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Women in Wealth podcast with Esther Szabo. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Esther comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Gates Pass Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Women and Wealth podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you receive notifications of new podcasts as they become available. Check out the website at www.GatesPassAdvisors.com for more information. This content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.